Today, let's discuss about case history taking. So this is what we as social workers use while working with clients with mental illness. Okay. So this is part of a psychiatric evaluation and it is actually the first section of it. The second section is the MSc taking, that is a mental status examination. So today we'll be discussing just about case history. So this is actually a very detailed one, but I'm going to give a very quick overview of it. Okay, so there are basically 7 steps and we'll go by each one of it. So before that, there are actually a few points that you guys have to keep in mind while doing it. Firstly, all the questions, whatever we are asking, make sure that you ask open-ended questions, okay, and not closed-ended questions. Because if you ask a closed-ended question, let's say, for example, didn't you come here to meet me? So that stops with an yes or a no. But instead of that, when you ask a question like, why are you here today? That gives a scope for a better answer, maybe a more elaborate one. So always ask open-ended question to the client. And secondly, there can be chances that what the client is saying is different from what the caregiver is saying. So that's okay and that's also important. So please record both of them separately under each section. Okay. And also be empathetic and be supportive throughout this process. Okay, because when somebody is coming to you, that person is in distress. So make sure that you're very empathetic throughout the process. So let's start. The first one is socio-demographic details. So socio-demographic details basically is a very basic details that we ask the client. That is the name of the client, the age, the sex, the occupation, and maybe education and the family income. So the very basic information that we collect. So that comes under this section, that is socio-demographic details. Okay. And the next one is chief complaints. So just like the name suggests, this basically means the main complaints or the main issues that the client is facing right now. So one important thing that you need to keep in mind is you always have to record exactly as how the client is saying. Okay, so if suppose, for example, if the client is saying that I'm here because my neighbor is trying to poison me. So record it as and how the client is saying. We know it is delusion of persecution, but don't record as a delusion of persecution. You should record as and how the client is saying. That is the verbatim. Okay, so maybe the caregiver has a different version to say. That's okay, you can record it under it. Okay, so whatever the client is saying, even though it might not make sense, it is important. So this section is also important another way because we'll get to know whether the client has insight about his or her illness. Okay, so sometimes the client might say that I don't have any problem, my family members are pushing me to come here. So there you get to know that the client might not have insight about the illness. So also ask open question here. So why are you here today? So there you get the answer for it. Okay. So next we are moving on to history of present illness. So this is basically the history of the current illness, that is a current issue that the client is facing right now. That is basically the history of the chief complaint, that is whatever the client is facing right now, its history. Like when did it start? Were there any triggers? So all that. For example, if substance abuse, if it is an issue related to substance abuse, you should know like when did it start? Were there any triggers? For example, if a person is coming to you and then this person had marriage issues or divorce and a job issue. So all that may be a trigger for the person. So all that should be recorded. So everything, that is the whole history of the present illness, should be recorded here. So certain details will be very minute, but every detail counts here. Okay, so that is basically the history of present illness. Past psychiatric history. So in history of present illness, you are trying to understand the present illness and its history. So you understand the cause of illness and other psychological issues related to it. So here, basically the cause of illness is nothing, just like what I've mentioned. When did it start? How did it progress? Everything. And other psychological issues, if anything was related to it, maybe a sleep issue, all that comes here. Okay, so next we are moving on to past psychiatric history. So basically, here we try to understand whether there was any other psychiatric issues or episodes before it. That is not the current one, but before it. So sometimes the client might not have any issue. Maybe this is the current chief complaint might be the very first one. But sometimes the client might have faced some other issue a few years back or a few months back. So that is important. You need to record it. So if there isn't anything, you can record that. Otherwise, record treatment history, the therapies taken, the medication taken, all that should be recorded. Because we need to understand, how the client was, responding to the treatment. Whether the client was ready to take the medicines, then whether it was actually, how it affected the other, maybe interpersonal relations of the client. So you basically try to understand how responsive the client was and also other related aspects. So everything will be recorded here. Okay. So next we are moving on to family history. So this is also a very important part. So here you can start with a family tree, because family tree is very easy to understand. Like with family tree, we'll be able to understand who are the members of the family, whether there was anybody else in the family who's got a history of mental illness, what is the relation to the client. So with the family tree, you can easily look at it and understand. So that is why you can always draw a family tree in the beginning of the section and then explain it. Okay, so here we are trying to understand if any other member of the family has got mental illness or any other history of substance abuse or suicide. So that is what we're trying to understand here. So in addition to that, we also need to understand, who are the family members, who is a primary caregiver, and then, how is the support the client is receiving from the family. All that could be recorded under it. So a family tree, and then you would record the other information related to it. Okay, so that is basically the family history. And next we are moving on to personal history. So this is basically everything. That is all significant events that has happened in the client's life right from the birth, okay, to where the client is right now. So basically you could ask about how, the whole delivery process was, whether it was normal, then other developmental milestones. You should know whether it was in the right time or there was a, delay in that. All that need to be understood. So that comes in the first step, and then we need to understand later how is the education, then how is the employment. So employment and all is important because you need to understand whether the client was stable in it. Okay, whether he or she used to go to work every day, whether he or she was happy about it, and then how was the relationship with the people in the office or wherever the client is working. Okay, so then you need to understand marital history, whether if the client is married, how it's going, or if it ended, what happened, everything. Then sexual history, that is in the case of, that is how did the client get to know about it, all the information, was it from friends or from family, all that should be recorded here. Okay, so then substance abuses, whether the client is taking any substance and when did it start and everything. And then law is basically, legal is basically whether the client is in conflict with the law, whether any issues or all that aspects comes here. So basically here you're trying to understand all the personal details, that is significant events, okay, that has happened in the client's life. So that is here. The last part is premorbid personality. So here we're trying to understand how the client was before the cause of illness. Okay, so what were the client's likes, dislikes in the usual mood, attitude, and how the client used to interact with the others, religious values. So all that need to be recorded here. So that is the last part. Okay, so basically, as you've seen, I'm just going to take the main slide. Okay, so basically there are 7 steps. Socio-demographic details, then you understand the chief complaints, and then you understand the history of the chief complaint, and then you understand the past psychiatric history, and then we have the family history, personal history, and then we understand the premorbid personality. Okay, so these are the major 7 headings we have. So one important point that I need to tell is that it's okay that if you can't collect all the information in one go, you can actually collect in different sessions that we'll be having with the client. So, and also, you learn this best when you work with the client. So it's okay if you're not, understanding it all in one go. So these are the major 7 points. Okay, thank you.